Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Prince George's County Memorial Library System's virtual program series. We will be getting started in just another moment with The Elephant We Don't See, a diversity dialogue. Thanks for joining us. We are also streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at PGCMLS. If you would like to help us spread the word about the program, we would greatly appreciate it. This is going to be a really great discussion. Second in our series with Michelle Hamiel and Kyla Hanington. And one more thing to do. Strange things were happening on my YouTube. Okay, well, but we're good to go on Facebook and Twitter and here in Periscope. Thank you all. So here we'll take a beat and then we'll start officially. Good evening. Welcome to the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. We are broadcasting to you live from Prince George's County, Maryland, which is the awesomest county in Maryland. We think, yes, we are biased, but we are very Prince George's proud. Prince George's County is larger than the District of Columbia, both in population and in land size by many, many times. So if you haven't heard of us, you should know about us. It's an amazing, thriving community. If you're having an echo, please try to make sure that you only have one Crowdcast window open. And if that persists, I'll share the link to the Facebook and Twitter feeds for you in a moment. Are you both getting an echo? Okay. So this is a part of our ongoing series called The Elephant We Don't See, a diversity dialogue. It's a monthly book discussion focused series that's looking at issues along the lines of equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism. My name is Nick. I'm the COO for communication and outreach. I almost said communication and audio based on the chat feed. Communication outreach here at the library. I'm so thrilled and honored to be introducing two beloved colleagues who are amazing humans, not to mention wonderful leaders in their respective organizations and in the community at large. So first up, we have our Chief Operating Officer for Public Services, Michelle Hamiel, who is with the library system. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
And we also have Kyla Hanington, who is the Outreach Coordinator at the Prince George's County Human Relations Commission. Welcome, Kyla.
Thank you.
So the format tonight is that Kyla and Michelle are going to have a free-flowing discussion about the book that is the selection for tonight. And then they'll be able to take audience questions throughout and also at the end. If you have a question, please type it into the chat or through the Q&A thing here in Crowdcast. Or if you're viewing elsewhere, just type it in and I'll be monitoring everything and feeding it back to Kyla and Michelle. We will have information flowing in the chat the whole time about how you can access the books in this series. And also how you can access anti-racism resources through the library. If you do not have a library card yet, you can get a free virtual library card even if you live outside of the county at pgcmls.info. Please check that out. If you have children under the age of 5, we have a program called Books from Birth, which sends your child a free book every month until they turn 5 to build their home library and support kindergarten readiness. Check that out too. And we have oodles of more resources that I hope you all come to learn about. And I will be here on the chat with you. But enough from me. I'm the publicist, so I could go on all day, but I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues here, Michelle and Kyla, and we really appreciate all of you tuning into this important discussion tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I want to tell you the book that we are reading tonight or discussing tonight is What If? Short Stories to Spark Inclusion and Diversity Dialogue. This is the best book. This was a recommendation from Kyla, and this one is the best one that we've read yet. Now, I could be partial because I love stories, and this is a book about diversity and inclusion, but it's told through stories, and they're the best stories. The book grabs you right from the beginning. The author tells his story as an immigrant to this country, but then the rest of the book is about stories that will make you think. And what I like is, I'm real big on how does this book help me? What can I do to improve me? How can it improve my organization? What steps do I need to take? And this little tiny book, I'm trying to see how many pages, it's less than 250 pages, tells you everything you need to know. Practical steps one of the things that, I mean, right in the beginning, it tells you you can hold a brown bag lunch. You can emphasize continuous learning, use the stories in your organizational newsletters, use the book as common reading, get EDI team started. It's packed with a lot. But when I first started reading the book, the thing that struck me the most was when he said, right in chapter 1, that talks about inviting fish to your pond. And he tells a story about trout and how you introduce trout to your pond. And he says, just as there are real and meaningful differences between various species of fish and the environments they need, there are real and meaningful differences between people and their workplace requirements. Then he goes on to say, how do we build a workplace environment where everybody thrives? And there's nothing wrong with creating an environment where everybody thrives. Now, I know that was a long introduction, Kyla, but tell me what you think.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. So a little background for people who maybe haven't joined us before. We talked about 2 other books. We talked about What If I Say the Wrong Thing? I think in April we talked about that. And in June, we talked about How to Be an Anti-Racist. And during and after the How to Be an Anti-Racist discussion, some people in the audience sent us questions about, what, is there a way that an organization, like is there a roadmap for an organization that wants to, build diversity in or kind of like restructure itself? And at the time, which was June 30th, that we had that discussion, I was like, I will do some research and get back to you, because I didn't know if there was an existing manual that I could just recommend to somebody. And I Googled, and as it turned out, I didn't find something. But then in preparation for this event, I, of course, was reading this book, which we planned. We picked this book out several months ago, and I've been reading it over the last few weeks. And as I've been reading it, I'm like, this is a practical guide for organizations. And I think as Michelle said, it has all of these exercises, but one of the things it does too that's really convincing about, like, why is it good to be curious? Like, why are we curious about other people's points of view? And why is that something we should want? And how does it, in the mercenary terms, how does it benefit me personally to be curious about somebody else's experience on a personal level and also from an organizational level? And he does it in this way. It's like 5-page, like those little stories are like 5 pages long. And so I'm sure everybody listening, you would have no trouble with a 50-page story, but I'm just saying, for me, like, having it in these manageable chunks where it's like 5 pages, and then he's got these things to think about and these questions to ask yourself as an individual or a leader in our organization. I thought it was awesome. So I wish 10 out of 10. Are we ranking books? 10 out of 10.
Yeah, there we go. Well, this one, at the end of each chapter, it does give you some practical things to do, but it always says there's a first glance, there's looking inward. So one of the things that I really appreciate, because it talks about this is for organizations, but it allows you to do an inward look. So, the first glance, what do you see? What did you get from this chapter? Look inward, and then there is the what if. And then there's an activity and an assignment. So it doesn't leave you. It just says, okay, do all these things. Now this week, let's practice what you learned. I love it. I just loved it.
He does a great thing where he talks about the way the stories that he gives you are, things that he's done in his own life. So the thing about the trout trying to stock a pond with trout, but not preparing the pond first, it didn't go so well for the trout. You know, he uses one about like what is he modeling for his kids, and he doesn't really like vegetables, and so the stories are sort of funny, and they're a little bit like he makes lots of jokes about not asking for directions, and they're these kind of light stories, but they really serve to illustrate ways in which he has limited himself and his experience and his way of relating to other people, and how much that hurt him, and then realizing how easy it was to just kind of like reframe, basically reframe his thoughts by being curious. It's just, I think this is such a book that advocates curiosity, and as you said, you know, the first glance, like there is an example. If I don't want to, I do kind of want to read to you all, but I'm trying to try and just summarize. He uses an example here about the original Star Trek series, which was credited for being quite diverse. And he mentioned some of the cast members who were in it. And, you know, he says, you know, so it's easy to see why many saw Star Trek as a model of diversity. Some people might argue the original Star Trek series outshines many modern shows in terms of racial and ethnic inclusion. So of course I'm reading this, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I'm just following along. And then he shares about a friend of his saying, well, the four main characters, the people who are on screen almost all the time, were four white men. Mm-hmm. And essentially, he says, this is his friend's quote. He says, Star Trek wasn't a show about diversity. It was just another show about a typical white man sitting in a big easy chair, reading a big screen, watching a big screen TV and telling people what to do. And his point with this story, he doesn't say that one's right or one's wrong. He's saying you probably either thought the first thing or the second thing. And that's totally okay. Can you now imagine, now that you've seen these both points of view, essentially, you know, so his first glance would be, what does the bridge of your organization Starship look like? How would your colleagues see it? And then the looking inward part is, how do you see the Starship Enterprise? Do you see it as a model for diversity or a continuation of the same old, same old? How strongly do you stick to your interpretation of facts in the face of a different perspective? And so I love that. I love this the idea of this different perspective, which is, you know, I think Star Trek was a great example because people have strong feelings, you know, have very strong feelings about the original Star Trek series, even if you're not a Trekkie. So I found that very illuminating.
Now, I will say that is the one story that I read and thought, I'm not going to like this book. And the reason is Star Trek was the first television series that had an interracial kiss. He made no mention of it. So then I was like, he said it was the most diverse, but he didn't make any mention of it. So I thought, okay, yeah, he doesn't get it either.
But to me, that's also what I liked was that he offered different. He didn't say one was right.
Right.
He didn't take the position that his friend was correct. At least, actually, let me just say this: I did not experience him as taking the position that his friend was correct. I experienced it as being like, here's one perspective, here's a different perspective. When something like this happens to you, are you able to consider the other perspective? You may have experienced that differently. So that would be interesting.
So here's a story for you. I have a colleague. I love her dearly. She has a very, how can I put it? She gets really upset when people walk in her office and don't speak. And
like
it has always bothered her. So, you know, first thing in the morning, people walk through the office and they don't speak.
Oh, okay.
And that happens to African Americans a lot. You know, we were raised that when you enter a room, you speak. Mm-hmm. And there are other cultures that are not taught that. So one of my colleagues and dear friend hates it when that happens. And we've talked about why that happens. We've talked about mental models, how people are raised. We've talked about where I believe that comes from. And for whatever reason, she cannot shake when a colleague enters her workspace and does not speak.
Mhm.
And just today, I kind of had to help her through. I said, let it go. This is not about you. It's about mental models. And it does not make sense to spend a whole lot of energy on something that's not worth it.
Mhm.
And that's what I think he's saying is there are different perspectives. And while we may see it as rude, disrespectful, or any number of things, that person just feels like, I don't have to speak to you. I'm focused on my day. I have entered the workplace and I am in work mode. And um, some people will have to come around and you have to let them be where they are. And I think that's what he's saying. There isn't a right or wrong. I don't think everybody understands various cultures and um, just something as simple as speaking, what that says to someone else. And
Right.
at some point, we have to get to um, understanding that this person may not be disrespecting us. And she even said to me, Michelle, you've said this to me before. I can't get beyond it.
I think that, I mean, the whole cultural, like crossing cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for those watching at home, I'm from Canada. And hi, everybody. And I'm super Canadian. And so, like, I will go bike riding here in Prince George's County, and every single person that I pass, every single person, I'm like, good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm like fat and out of shape. I'm panting. I'm like, drooling, and someone passes, and I'm like, good morning. Well, that is not necessarily everyone's culture here. And I know that, you can take the girl out of Canada, but you can't take the Canadian out of the girl, right? So even though I realize that when people are running and they've got their headphones in or they're biking and they probably don't want to talk to me as they're running past me because they actually run faster than I bike, I still am like, good morning.
How is that possible? But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Seriously? It's possible. If you do nothing but sit on your couch eating ice cream and you don't do any exercise and then you get on a bike after 30 years, people will be able to run faster than you.
Okay.
That's a whole nother conversation for another night. But so the thing is, my point is, I know that even though I realize it's a cultural thing, I still find myself being like kind of hurt when people don't say hi back.
Mm-hmm.
And like a way that I could deal with that would be to not say hi to absolutely every single person that I pass. But my Canadian friend there, Trudy, in the comments, Trudy knows I can't not say hi to everybody that I pass. Like it's so deeply ingrained in me from a cultural perspective to say hi to everybody that I keep thinking that people will change and say hi to me back. It doesn't always work. So I relate to that. And like, how do you, fundamentally sort of like be yourself, but maybe not necessarily hold everybody to the same, I don't want to say the same standard because it's not like less or more, but just recognize that people are coming at it from a different perspective. Actually, I would like to, can I read? I did say, Nick said
absolutely.
Oh yeah, Trudy apologized. Yeah, we apologized to inanimate objects too. So I do want to read something that I thought was very timely. This book is actually written a number of years ago. We are working from the 10th anniversary edition. So it is not, the 10th anniversary edition came out in 2018, but this book came out in 2008. So I'm just going to read something because I think it's very timely. Imagine you live in a community in which a small percentage of the population upholds the Christian faith. You are one of those Christians. Your forefathers founded this community many generations ago, but over the course of time, non-Christians took over and became the majority. A few years ago, the majority, the non-Christians, started a school. To honor those who had first settled the community, they decided to have the school's team name the Christians. Now, they never consulted Christians in the community about naming the team. They didn't even talk with anyone about how best to honor the community's founders. This majority doesn't know much about the Christian faith. They know that nearly all Christians participate in something called communion on a regular basis, and they have observed the communion process of eating bread and drinking wine. The majority have also noticed that Christian art often portrays someone hanging on a cross, and that many Christians enact something called the crucifixion at a time called Easter. Now, the majority has decided that the school's mascot should do something at school assemblies and athletic competitions to build school and community pride. Because the team is the Christians, they think it should be something Christian-like. So they choose communion as the perfect ritual to perform at school functions. Not only would it generate pride, they reason, but it would show that Christians are valued in the community. When you hear the plan, you quickly suggest to the majority that what they were planning to do will not honor the Christian faith, but actually will dishonor it. You tell them that taking communion is a sacred act of meaningful significance to Christians, and that's doing so for fun and show as blasphemous. As you make your objections, many non-Christians become defensive. In fact, they take offense at your objections and insist that you should be thankful for their efforts to bring attention to a wonderful Christian ritual. I'm going to sort of skip, but it goes on, and it said, at this time, the reenactment of communion has become a regular part of halftime activities at basketball and football games. People in the stands create motions around it, putting their hands to their mouth twice to signify the eating of bread and the drinking of wine when their team needs support. They've even added a life-size cross with a real student tied to it for a crucifixion effect. Non-Christians in the community love it. They identify with it. They are full of school and community pride when they see it. So it continues, but I, of course, got to this part and I thought I was so glad to see this in here, putting something that there are folks who struggle to understand how a concept like mascots could be harmful or demeaning other folks. And I thought the fact that he chose to do this, again, not in 2020, 12 years ago, terms that, not everybody, of course, not everybody reading this book is a Christian, but lots of people can at least relate to the idea of Christians or think of Christians and like what Christianity is and know about the faith. And how would that group of people, how would we experience it if folks had like an athlete tied to a cross and people pretending to take communion at halftime? I really, really thought it was a gift to folks, maybe, who are challenged to put themselves in other people's shoes around that particular issue. How was that? Was that one that resonated for you?
Well, I was going to say, someone wrote amazing analogy. That one didn't resonate as much as the chapter 18, I know everything. And I think especially in an organization where you have lots of veterans and lots of millennials, and the veterans, of course, know everything. And many of us are at a place where we've experienced a lot, and we do think we know everything. And we think that the millennials don't know anything. So it's really, where's the meeting of the minds? Some of us are veterans who want to mother millennials, and we don't take enough time to make sure that we are absorbing what they have to offer. And that goes back to his first chapter. What kind of environment are we creating for them? And that story just makes me think, how many millennials enter any organization, just not the library necessarily, but any organization can't find a place. And some people only think of diversity in terms of race or religion. We say age, but we don't think about the environment that we're creating and how people fit in and feel like they're being included. And we want to fix our race. We want to fix our race issues, but we don't necessarily want to have a meeting of the minds between that older generation and millennials. And we veterans miss a whole lot when we don't want to listen to them or even respect some of those things that we say, this would never happen when we started working.
Right. Right.
So this book just deals with everything. And I think if you're going to have an organization that is inclusive, if you're going to deal with equity and diversity and anti-racism, according to Kendi's definition, you need this book.
Right. Right. I do love the questions. Like, so going back to, so Michelle mentioned a story, but I know everything already. And it was, in this case, it was somebody pronouncing a word differently than he did, using a different letter. So he says pom pom, as in like, cheering, pom pom. And the student talked to him and said pom pon. And he corrected the student, was like, oh, you're wrong. And the student was like, actually, you're wrong. And no.
Right.
You need to get a dictionary. And so she busts out a dictionary. And of course, in fact, both, and I learned something actually today too, that both were accurate. And so what he was saying in that is, is it possible that you have some pom-pom, some misconceptions, like just certainty that you're right? And you're not even trying to be rude. You're just saying, oh, I'm sorry. You're like, that's why I go back to the curiosity thing, that if somebody says something to you that's different than what you know, that you're certain, are we able to just take a moment and be curious? And I think his encouragement, and in that same section, and Michelle, and I'm going to steal your line here, because Michelle, for those watching, Michelle mentioned this to me earlier that she really liked this. I'm now, which is in that same section, he asked the kind of chore he gives the reader is discuss a situation similar to one in this story where you had to correct what you previously had thought to be true. This is the part that I love. He says, how devastating really was the outcome?
Yeah.
I just think that's it. It's right there. It's like we get so centered on what we know, like our certainty, or at least I'm speaking for myself. I'm sorry, all y'all watching are probably like, you probably don't do this. I get very centered in my certainties, and it can be scary, right? It can be scary to be corrected, or it can be scary to think.
Nobody likes to be wrong.
No. But then when you like take the moment and consider whatever it is, and it's, probably something more significant than pom pom or pom pon, but how devastating really was the outcome? It wasn't, my experience is that when I'm wrong, which is frequently, that I'm actually so grateful afterwards. I'm like, I'd never seen it that way. I'd never thought about it. And I don't necessarily I don't always change my mind, but I get understanding. And so it's like, okay, my position is still the same, but understand where someone else is. I can understand how somebody has a different position than I do, and I don't feel upset about it, or I don't feel angry, or I feel more connected to that person. So I just love that. I want to try and hold on to that. How devastating will the outcome be if it turns out, my little idea is not correct?
And I'm looking at Rachel's comment. She says, I love finding out I've thought about something wrong. And I think there's a difference in thinking about that you were doing something, you thought about something wrong, than someone telling you you are wrong. And it's all in how people tell you too. And I think it takes a big push. Rachel says it's humility to understand that we are not perfect people, that everybody makes mistakes, and we learn and grow from our mistakes. And but not everybody welcomes the thought that they had a wrong idea. And sometimes that's the thing that shuts people down. How dare you tell me I was wrong? And that goes back to my story. Sometimes it's the veterans in the organization that are saying, we have done it this way for 30 years. You're wrong. We are not. I'm just trying to show you how you should do it. There isn't a better way. And we create that divide.
One of the things that he does that I've been thinking about, like in my own workplace, and also like just in different groups, like I'm in a writers group and these different things that I'm part of, is suggesting that when you have a problem in an organization, or you're doing a group act, you're trying to settle something, that you have these groups. So making a small group of a small group of people, or dividing a large group into small groups. I'm talking too much, but you got my point. You don't have a number of people in a group. But what the group should be diverse in the sense of job diversity, right? So maybe you have a manager and you have, a brand new lower level employee. So, and age diversity, as we talked about, or racial diversity, gender diversity, to really try and give these different voices in the group to the best of your ability based on your organization. Mm-hmm. And then they all have a piece of paper, and you have the problem, and each person gets the piece of paper and writes down an idea about the problem, or basically brainstorming, but you're brainstorming on paper. So, I'm going to get the paper, and then Michelle gets the paper, and then whoever's, Nick gets the paper, and we're going to pass it around. And the ideas that you can get, and I was thinking, how often is it that we, if at my job, if I had an issue, how likely would I be to go get somebody who's like, not even necessarily even in my department, and just be like, hey, I just want to brainstorm with you, and allow somebody who's new and isn't thinking in the same patterns. Mm-hmm. How often first of all, I never, to answer the question, I've never done that. But how interesting would it be to involve that kind of conversation and see where someone who isn't doing the same thing all the time, what creativity they have about how to handle an issue. And I think that I love that idea about bringing in these voices that we don't traditionally have.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at Ruth's comment, and Ruth says, maybe there's a better way to say something. I'd like to offer some history about my thinking. One of the things that I try to say is, let me give you the backstory.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. Beth, it's helpful to help people to listen just for understanding. I don't have to necessarily have to agree, but seeing that other person's perspective is huge. And yeah, that for me has been, I always feel very grateful when I can see something from someone else's point of view. Mm-hmm. And I think, as I said before, just to learn. And what he does with this book from an organizational point of view that I think is very helpful for anyone who's in an organization or running an organization or looking at trying to make the organization more dynamic. He, without being heavy-handed about it, he explains why a business or an organization should want to have diversity. And he doesn't say because it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. You'd be a good person. He's like, look, businesses that have diversity are successful. They're dynamic. They're contenders in the marketplace. He gets you. If you're not feeling it necessarily personally, he gets it to the organizations. I think on a business capacity that you are going to be just more efficient, innovative. That is better for the business to have this diversity. And it's very, I think, going back to how Michelle started this, is that, for people who are looking for kind of a roadmap, and we had talked about this with this book, that even though it says how to, it's really probably not a roadmap, but that this book really does give you practical exercises that you can do in your business and organization to help people and that have real approaches.
Yeah. The story you shared, someday they will see. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at the exercise at the end of that chapter is stepping into moccasins. And there's that old adage, don't talk about anyone because you haven't walked in their shoes.
Right.
One of the things he suggests that you do is look inward and think about the times. Has anyone ever told you to quit being so sensitive? So
Yes.
when somebody, there's something that has offended you and they tell you to shake it off,
Right.
quit being so
Take a joke.
sensitive. Oh, just ignore him.
Right. Right.
And how did you feel? Now, that is not to make you dwell on what just happened to you, but it's really to make, at least this is my take on it, because I always turn things inward as it suggests. How often am I doing that to someone else? Lessening what's just occurred to them. And did I like it when it happened to me? And what can I do to make that change?
Right. Right.
And he says, what if our uninformed acts of intended goodwill offend others? So when somebody tells you, oh, don't worry about him, shake it off. What if it's just joking? When people do say, oh, I was just kidding with you. What if the honorable thing to do is not what you want to do? And I think that's thought provoking. What if the honorable thing to do is not what you want to do? What if?
Right.
What happens? Because I know I've made mistakes and then had to go back. And when someone has even been mean to me, I had to do the honorable thing. And going back to what he said, how devastating was it? I just there's so much in this little book.
It is. We could just read to you all night, kids. It really is so good, and I think it's easy to read. It's engaging. It's but I think just having that practicality, like there's a chapter here called "Harmless Images," and he goes back to talking about First Nations people, like quote unquote. Excuse me, because I'm actually going to quote it, but I just forgive me in advance. Boy and Indian TV shows. Okay, so. And what the impact is when you see those messages all the time over generations. Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? Who are the winners and who are the losers? And so that what are the things that we have seen? So that's a really obvious one, where who wins all the time in those shows and who loses. And so what do you internalize about what winners look like and what losers look like? And so he goes on to use that as an example of sort of a stepping off point about what are other things that we see in TV. And I was thinking, gosh, in the TV shows, who's always getting raped and murders is women. Right. So women, oh my gosh, what do you see on TV about what happens to women, and how much over generations, not generations of TV watching, but however many decades of TV watching and movies where we see this, the victimization, the abuse over and over and over and over again. How much does that become? You just kind of think less, like men are strong, women are weak, and you don't even. Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in there, but that's what's happened to especially African-American teen males. Who do you see on television, on the news, portrayed in a negative way? And that is what makes people, when African-American males walk by, grab the purses and think these people are all horrible.
Yep.
It is what makes people think working in a predominantly African-American community, it's not safe when things have not happened in those. And I'm talking of library branches.
Right.
It's the images that are portrayed or are shown in the media.
And it is so insidious. And I think when he gets to this chapter, he says, at the end of the chapter, he says, so think about the idea of heroes. Who are the heroes? And he says, who are the heroes in your organization? Like, what do they look like? Does your organization seem to favor a certain model of leader or a certain line of worker? And then the next one is looking inward. Who are the winners and losers in your mental model? Like, what does it mean? And I think that was like, what does it mean to be successful? Like for me, if I think about that, what's my mental model of what it means to be a winner? And like really to try to unpack what that would look like. I mean, I can tell you for me, it would be a man.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a white man at a certain income level, at a certain professional title, right? Like doctor, lawyer, something. I mean, but it's not me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like to realize that I actually have that deeply seated in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I hedge authority. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm confessing everything to y'all tonight, but I know.
Tell us your secrets, Kyla.
Oh, okay. Everybody, here we go. So when I go to buy a car, which is not often, hasn't happened very often, but nothing gets my goat more than if I have a man with me, than the man who's selling me a car. I'm buying the car, talking to the man that's with me. Like, I'm just like, hello, I'm buying the car. Makes me really mad. But I sometimes, if I need to deal with something like to do with my car or to do with some kind of thing that I think I'm going to be talked down to about, I'll bring my husband with me. So because I just don't want to deal with it. And so I will like cede authority to the man because I just don't even want to I don't even want to deal. So at some part I can understand not really wanting to deal. But the other thing that I do is I'm ceding authority. I'm giving it over. I'm like, okay, I'm going to stand back and the guys can handle it. And so there is this part of me that's like, I really have just internalized this sense that someone else is going to do a better job than I am in dealing with certain things. And I mean, that's there. And so in my own life, but in what other ways do I, if there's a man in the room, we're having a meeting, would I think the man had more authority than my female colleague? Like, I'm not happy to be confessing this all to you, but when I read, really thinking about that, and that's what I think this book does a really good job at, who are the personal mental heroes? Like when you think about that, who comes to mind? And it was, for me, it was really, unfortunately, eye-opening. No, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. I love this. I recommend this to anyone who's looking for organizational change. We're going to start a EDIA team at the library, and I'm going to get this book for every member of the team. I recommend it for anyone looking for a new course in their personal journey with some concrete ways to make you think differently. I'd recommend it for people who just want a good short read. I mean, his stories are good stories. They kind of suck you in. He's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
I love this book. I'm looking at what is it saying? Oh, Nick says that have had that happen a lot with his mom, who is Latina, and she has a heavy accent. The author of this book came to this country. His mother was Vietnamese, and it was during the Vietnam War, and he can remember how his mother was treated, and she thought she was bringing him to a better life, and that really started his journey of this kind of work as a little boy, because he just wants to level the playing field. And these are my words, not his, but he wants to level the playing field for everyone. It's time for us to take questions. And we went a little over, but anyone have any questions?
We've had a couple things come through in the formal Q&A box. The first was a comment that I'll just read out from Jody. This was from earlier on, who said, another aspect of Star Trek is its inclusion of a Spock, not as an alien, but as someone on the spectrum. Very important for many people. He missed that aspect of diversity. And then the other question from Tamara, sorry, I don't know the pronunciation of your name exactly. Will this be recorded and available online after the session? This is great, and I would love to share it. It certainly will be, both at this link and also on our Facebook and Twitter. And then I'll share a YouTube link as well But our YouTube channel is at PGCMLS.
And Keisha says, what is the name of the team she is starting? We're starting an EDIA, and I'm sorry I used the acronym. It is Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism.
I'm just waiting to see if anything. So
I have a question for you both here in the silent microphone. You're thinking of this book. Did it change after having heard from Dr. Kendi live last week? Did that have any impact on your read of What If, or your consideration of it now after his talk?
Not for me.
yeah, I'm going to agree with that too, actually. So here's with Dr. Kendi's book, and also the what I found. Actually, I'll just talk about the book. When I read the book, and here's my, I know this hurts all librarians everywhere are going to be hurt when they see what I've done with this book. So I apologize on behalf of all librarians. I mean,
That is your personal book, though, right?
it's my personal book, but I just know
Okay.
that people don't like to see books that look like that. So as I was reading this book, there was so much in this book where I mean, you can see like my Post-it notes, I folded on pages, I just underlined, over and over again. And really what I felt like I was going to have to do, or that I do need to do, is read this book, 6 or 7 times to absorb it. Because as I'm reading, I'm saying, But then I closed it, and then it was like, okay, wait, and then how can I, and what is that going to look like? And it's great. And it's very much like it's going to be a journey of multiple readings and multiple thinking and multiple interpretations. And this, I think, frankly, was just simpler. And I don't necessarily mean simpler in terms of, and in fact, excuse me, my fire alarm's going off, but I feel like someone's cooking in my house. We're just going to let it go. We're going to let it go.
Maybe you should go check.
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
If you see flames behind me, just let me know. But no, I think we're just cooking. Sorry about that, guys. I could hear that, and I was like, "What's happening?" Okay, but this book is when I say simple, I don't think it's simpler necessarily in the overall concept, but just in terms of like, I read it and I immediately feel that here is something that I can chew on right now, and that I can actually take action on right now. And this book for me is more like I'll be reading this for the next year and trying to internalize it. Mm-hmm. I think Nick, did I actually even answer your question? Like,
yeah,
flames. Okay,
that was good. Hey, this is live theater. We're take it all. It's all good.
Oh, my daughter said it's cooking. It's not real fire. We have my daughter in the chat box just letting us know everything's okay, everybody.
So let us know in the chat if you've got questions for Michelle and Kyla. Otherwise, you'll have to put up with my continued questioning, or we'll let them ask each other questions.
Oh, here it goes again. I'm so sorry. Coming again. So, all right.
Are there any other questions?
I will say, if we can just circle back really quick while people are thinking of questions. Early on in April, we did this book. It was not part of our series. We started the series after talking about this book. But I do want to mention this book again. What if I say the wrong thing? Because where I do see a bit of a similarity is giving some really practical ideas, like really practical, like here's a question. I'm going to tell you a story, and then now I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to chew on it and think about it. And so I think that these books in tandem are a good set to maybe try.
Yes.
What do you think, Michelle?
I agree. In fact, when I started this one, I thought of the other. Yeah. And someone asked, she's reading White Fragility, and she wants to know what we think of that. I have not actually read White Fragility, and I was thinking I need to go back and read it. I was supposed to read it last year and picked it up. I'd had surgery and just said, yeah, I don't want to read this right now. So maybe that's one we could do, Kyla.
Let's do it. Let's add it. We'll add it.
Okay.
So we're going to come back to your question, Beth.
September.
Instead of
Okay.
September.
Your schedulers.
Right. And I know
The name, What If I Say the Wrong Thing is the Renee Myers book.
Oh yeah, so yeah, let me hold it up. It's what What If I Say the Wrong Thing by Renee A. Myers. And we talked about this back in April, I think, and it really was. Nick's got it in there. Look at him. He's got it in the
I
chat.
love Nick.
I know he's so good. We should give a shout out to Nick.
Yes,
Disembodied voice.
and Nick is running 2 programs at the same time.
Per use. We shut down the baseball party because they were losing terribly.
Oh,
to Toronto, to my Canadian, Canadians in the house.
Kyla, we're here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, to Toronto. All right,
mind you, you didn't know who we were playing at first.
Okay, it's Renee Myers.
Renee Myers.
ERNA Myers.
We have a comment from Ellie who says, I'm working on evaluating a range of resources for white folks to bring them to speed. There's a list of 12 to 20 books most often recommended. That is overwhelming for some folks. It would be great to get feedback on choices and why, if they need to be narrowed. I'm also trying to come up with the films I've reviewed. We've had a lot of great staff programs around these topics, both for books and also films and documentaries through our Readers and Viewers Advisory series. So I would encourage folks to check those out on our YouTube page, which is youtube.com/PGCMLS. And I'm sure any of those library staff members would love to hear from you via email if you'd like to continue the conversation about those books and if you'd like someone to kind of give you some thoughts on the list that you're working on. And you can email us at pr@pgcmls.info, and we're happy to connect you with folks. And I'll put that email address into the chat.
And I am developing a list for the Maryland State Library's LibGuide. And if Kelsey is watching, she's going to kill me because I was supposed to have a list to her by the 23rd. But it's coming.
So I will say, I know we do have another event coming up because I know people are looking for book recommendations. So we are going to be talking on the last Tuesday in August. So I'm hoping that Nick will be able to give us the exact date because it's not at my fingertips. We're going to be talking about this book on the last Tuesday in August. This is Blind Spot: Hidden Biases of Good People on August 25th. So it'll be Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And I have not read this. So what I've been doing, I think Michelle's been doing the same thing, as we don't read in advance. I mean, we read before tonight, but like not a lot in advance. Like we try to, so that we're very fresh on the book. So I have not started reading this book yet, but I'll read it before August. And hopefully we'll be able to give people some feedback about this.
I'm hoping it'll be just as good.
I know, I'm excited. I'm excited. We also want to get at some point, we do not have this schedule, but I'm going to hold this up again. We were supposed to do this book in June, on June 30th, but we actually, because we had Dr. Kendi come in and we were very excited that we were going to have Dr. Kendi, we switched this book out for this book. So I'm just holding things up. I don't even know if people can read these fast enough, but in terms of like some ideas for people to think about or to join us for further discussion, we've got a few different books coming your way.
And we will add White Fragility.
Right, White Fragility. I think did we just agree that we're doing that in September?
We did.
Last Tuesday in September, kids. We'll talk about White Fragility. And is there any other? Have we missed any questions or anything?
Not so far. I just want to encourage folks to please check out our ebook collection. We have many of these very important hot off the press books on anti-racism available in multiple copies. So there are really great titles available right now, including the ones from this series. But Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates is available. How to Be an Anti-Racist is available from Dr. Kendi. The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton. Tears We Cannot Stop by Michael Eric Dyson. The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, and many, many more. And those are all currently available in multiple copies. Our collections team has been doing an amazing job of making sure that the access is matching the demand on all of those books. So please take advantage of that if you don't want to go into getting your own copy, because that can be complicated with back orders now anyways.
All right, I'm still
Oh, we have a nice comment there, Beth. Thank you you said, I teach reading and appreciate your new children's books on Overdrive that are diverse children's books and include how to talk to white children about anti-racism. Thank you for that feedback. We'll share it with our collections team.
So I'm going to leave you all. We have 5 minutes, so if you have a question, feel free to. But I'm going to give you all an assignment from this book. This week, identify the privileges you might have and find a way to use these privileges to help others. Because that's what this is really all about. This work is lifting others up and leveling the playing field. So if you have something that someone else, or you've been exposed to something someone else has not been exposed to, see how you can use that to help someone.
I want to do my personal challenge this week is to try, as I said before, I really want to try also to ask somebody that I wouldn't normally ask to like brainstorm with me about something, you know, and just see what I learn from that person, or like how how we open up our synapses. And, you know, Michelle, I don't know, I think we talked about this. Do I have time to even unpack this one? One of the things when we talk about diversity, and so I work for the Human Relations Commission, we're the folks who look at discrimination, investigate cases of discrimination in the county. And one of the things that I find is that often here, people do have a fairly diverse friends group in terms of racial diversity. Where I see people struggling is to spend time around people who don't think like they do. Mm-hmm. And the challenge that I also wanted, you know, for myself and for everybody too, is are there ways to engage? And when I say conversation, I don't mean shouting or arguing with people on the Facebook, but like is it possible to engage with someone and actually get to know or have a conversation with someone who doesn't think or vote the way you do? And I think that is when we talk about diversity, that is part of it, political opinion, background, you know, like that. And one of the things he talks about in this book that I think was great is he talks about if you have an opinion, and he talks about cognitive dissonance, where you know something, you have a certain belief system, and there's somebody who believes something very different than you, and you have cognitive dissonance about it. He challenges you to think about what steps, what happened to them in their life, or what led, not like in a necessarily a victim way, but just what is the path in their life that took them to this very different position than you have. And I thought that was another interesting kind of mental challenge to sort of, I'm not saying we all have to do it today, but I just think we can grow towards.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, you're really good at talking to people and bringing stuff out of them. So I think that'll be easy for you.
Well, I'll report. I tell you what, I'll report back on when we do this book. I'll say I met new friends, or I'll say I have forgot my homework assignment. How does that sound?
Okay.
Okay. I think we might have a couple more questions. I know we're almost out of time. We've got like a minute left, but I see it might look like another question's popped up. Does this book address all of the differences and not just race? Yes. So this book talks about race. It talks about socioeconomic. It talks about degreed people, or various degrees and levels of education versus not having a degree or not finishing high school. Like I feel like it does a pretty good job actually.
It does.
Not being sort of monolithic. Yeah. I think that, is there anything, does anybody have one last burning question they'd like to ask us?
I'm going to throw out a big one, and maybe you'll just say it's a preview for next time. How should folks think about renewing their spirit and energy with these conversations, as you know, the intensity and the importance and heaviness of these topics can wear on anyone, and especially the folks who are the victims of discrimination. But how can folks look towards kind of figuring out what works for them to renew their energy and commitment as the days go on with this, so that it is a sustainable and long-term effort rather than just a flash in the pan when there's big moments in society? And you can say read Blind Spot and come back next week. That's fine.
Do you want to offer something?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say probably that's going to take more than a minute. So, and I think that is something that we should probably come back to and try and put some more time to. I think it's a really good question.
Yeah.
My immediate response is in the 30 seconds is to build in time for self-care. Like beyond that is a very real, like that one's job is not necessarily to have this conversation with your colleagues or, as you said, especially the people who are on the receiving end. It is not, you don't have to do that all the time, and it can be exhausting and daunting, disheartening. So I encourage that making space for times when that conversation is not happening, that actually gives you energy and vigor to continue later. Michelle?
Yeah, I would agree with that. When you live it, it is exhausting. And for me, I don't like to live in a place of anger. And you can get angry very quick. So you are right. Self-care is very important. And it is also very freeing to talk about when things have happened to you, to share your stories. And that's part of his advice in this book, is to share your stories. You're creating stories, and your journey creates your story. So share that. Good ones and bad ones, because we learn from both. And I think that sharing the story really helps me. And most people who get to know me know I'll share a story in a minute. Yeah.
All right. So I know.
Beth is asking somebody named Candace, but it's a good question. Do you feel like this moment in history is different? And she may want Candace to answer.
Oh yeah, it does look like she's asking Candace.
I'm going to say, having been a 60s baby, yes, this moment is definitely different. And we are over our time. So maybe that's something we can lead with in Blind Spot. That might be a good lead in for Blind Spot.
Yeah. So hopefully you all can come and join us last Tuesday of August. We'll chat about this, but I'm also going to spend some time, and I think Michelle and I will work together to spend some time about like renewal and, keeping the conversation going.
Yeah.
Cool. This is like a good Netflix binge. You've given us a good hook for next time, and we have an assignment, and we're ready for more. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Michelle and Kyla for another wonderfully insightful and thoughtful and really generous conversation. We are all lucky to have the two of them to bring us together like this. I will continue sharing links if you have questions here in the chat for the next few minutes. And do visit our YouTube channel. That's where everything is archived from past programs, youtube.com/PGCMLS. And we will look forward to seeing you on the last Tuesday of August, which is Tuesday, August 25th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Canadians, welcome. Hawaii, welcome. Everyone, welcome. And we'll keep.
And Beth, we're going to leave with your question next time.
Right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you all
so much.
Thanks, Kyla.
Thank you, buddy.